All right, joining me is CA Conservative. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I just had a long weekend over yeah, you know what happened to me this weekend, right?
Yeah.
Long nights, late dinners, extended family. But apparently over the weekend, I just heard or at least today I heard that Zelensky has basically declared that the Battle of the Donbass has begun. What's changed in the last few hours?
I mean, they've started their usual artillery barrage across the front,
Right.
across the line of control. Um, the funny thing is, 2 months ago, if you had said that the Russians would have deliberately restricted themselves to invading Donbass, I probably would have said it would go rather well for them.
Right.
But since they decided to do the exact opposite of that, to launch an invasion across the whole front, they don't have the army for what they want to do now.
Yep.
Something I don't think a lot of people have really thought of.
Okay,
well, I mean, they started the war with the army to do it, but the losses that they've faced are almost unimaginable. They're at about, I mean, the Ukrainian figures are almost certainly correct, at least 20,000 dead, probably 50 to 60,000 casualties, an enormous amount of armored vehicles and such destroyed.
Right.
They do not have, and they went from a situation in which they probably outnumbered the Ukrainians, maybe about 1.5 to 1, to where the Ukrainians now almost certainly outnumber them by a lot.
Yeah. I want to you see the map I'm putting up, right?
Yeah.
So from what I'm seeing.
Thank you for upgrading to Windows 11.
Oh, that happened in between our last.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did, and I think it screwed over my computer at first. But basically, from what I'm seeing on this map, these positions look to have been fairly stable for the past month, with the big exception of the withdrawal from the north. But other than that, over here, this looks quite stable.
Well, I mean, it's not so much stable as it is just sort of empty space between each force. I mean, they've gone, they said, the Russian, because I mean, the Ukrainians, what color am I on? Just we'll do yellow. So I mean, the Ukrainians have been, launching attacks in this axis here, and the Russians have been counterattacking with little success. So I mean, there are movements, just very limited, with each side mostly just going for this region here.
Oh, this one right here.
Yeah, I mean, the big brain plan, and the one that their idiot defenders keep saying is a genius strat, is to go.
You're able to edit this. Cool.
I'm just drawing on your screen.
Oh,
because
cool.
I mean, the bulk of, and the obviously we don't know where Ukrainian forces are. They've done an extremely good job at masking their movements about the country. But at least when the war started, I'll switch to green since we can't see the yellow. Their best forces were in this area here.
That's Ukrainian forces.
Along along the former line of control. Now, nowadays, that's probably not true. Most of their units probably fell back to defend Kiev, and now they're back. And so losing all of those forces, while not fatal, it would certainly be a significant problem. But the problem for Russia is that this is an enormous country that they would have to not just overrun, but actively besiege in order to, complete an encirclement of all the forces here. And it's nonsense.
It's 240 kilometers.
They couldn't do it with Kiev. They couldn't do it with Sumy. They couldn't do it with Chernihiv. They couldn't do it with Mykolaiv. These are not, they couldn't do it with Kharkov.
Well, the Russians are banking that because it's towards the east, it's going to be in their backyard. So,
But I mean, effectively, what they've done is instead of, because they, for all practical purposes, they outnumber the Ukrainians in terms of military might, right? Perhaps
yeah,
not in manpower anymore, but in terms of equipment. And but what they've effectively done, instead of forcing the Ukrainians, by attacking across a wide front, forcing the Ukrainians to defend it all, so you can't mass air defense units. Your air force kind of has to be all over the place. There's fighting everywhere, and the bigger force, in theory, wants a bigger war, right?
hmm
Because it can provide more firepower. But what they've now said is that we're only going to do basically this, and really just this. They've removed the advantage of having more stuff and said we're only going to focus on this one place. And they're doing it in just their usual idiocy. You have this massive salient forming here, and we've already heard, you can even kind of see them on this map, to where the Ukrainians are counterattacking against their lines, because the Russians don't know how to do rear guard defense. This is not the beginning of the war. There's not this sort of aura of invincibility that goes around with these so-called superpower. These are not, good soldiers we're talking about here.
yeah. Do you think Ukraine could win this thing? And what does a victory look like? Does it involve liberating driving Russia out of the Donbass, driving Russia out of the south, driving Russia out of Crimea?
Well, I mean, we defined victory in the beginning as Ukraine simply holding on, and now, by that definition, it is impossible for Russia to win. They're never going to get anywhere near Kiev again. They've lost that opportunity. As for if they can take the east and hold the south, to where, say, it looked something like this is the border.
Mhm.
I wouldn't rate it as a particularly high chance, just because one of the big differences is that the front in the north was made up of mostly very dynamic defense of strategies on the part of Ukraine. They didn't have many pre-prepared defenses, so they were fighting mostly, on the run and, with ambushes kind of thing. Whereas in the east, they have 8 years worth of prepared defenses all along these villages here. These are not going to fall easily.
Even if the Russia somehow were to complete the encirclement.
Well, they won't complete the encirclement, but
Yeah.
even if they did, taking those, it would be 50 Mariupols. That city should have fallen on day one, and yet they're still fighting.
There's still like pockets of resistance, but
Yeah.
they're surrounded on all sides.
Oh, they're not gonna survive this war, but the casualties they've likely inflicted on the Russians render any unit involved in that action as non-existent. I think a lot of Westerners, they hear casualties and they're like, okay, maybe of a unit of 5, say 1,000, they maybe had 100 casualties, right?
But
that would be even high for Western casualties. But there are a lot of Russian units. I even saw one today that have suffered, 60% casualties.
yeah, it's
just insane losses.
Yeah, and that doesn't even consider the Russian warships that have been promoted to submarine.
Well, that was it. Both doesn't. The Ukrainians weren't doing anything in the Black Sea anyway. But that just, I think it's emblematic of it all. Russia has an aging military that hasn't been modern in 40 years, with equipment that is way outdated for the modern world, and with personnel that have no clue what they're doing and are just incapable. That ship had 3 forms of air defense. They all failed.
Yeah, it's a similar situation to like the Falklands, where you had the Argentinian dictatorship that had like conscripts who really didn't know what they're doing against a volunteer professional army of the British.
Yeah, and even that was a closer engagement than this is starting to become.
Yeah.
but I mean, it's emblematic. I mean, you have, and I mean, not even to mention just another thing about the mosque is obviously, Ukrainian morale is obviously at beyond 100%.
Mhm.
And I mean, we use the term fanaticism rather negatively these days, but in a lot of places, that those are the kind of Ukrainian soldiers you're going to see. In Mariupol, they'll be fighting to the death.
Yeah, but like if Russia's able to like draw a border like from Kharkiv to like Kherson, Putin might be able to spin that credibly as a victory.
But I mean, the problem, well, their failure to take Kharkov is why their flank is so exposed. That city can project a significant amount of interference against that encirclement. And I mean, and in the south, I mean, we've already seen a number of partisan actions on, with the locals. That's not going to get any easier for the Russians,
Yeah.
especially as, once this attack, once this initial attack, just as we saw when the war started, once the initial attack is blunted, their forces have advanced a little bit and are worn out, then you'll start to see even heavier losses.
Yeah. What I'm kind of hoping, this is sort of my fantasy, is that because Ukraine is fighting a war of self-defense, they basically drive Russia out of the Donbass, drive Russia out of Crimea, and manage to take Russian territory all the way up to Volgograd.
I mean, it's nice to dream, but I mean, ideally, I would say a restoration of the original border is probably the best they can hope for in their current state.
Yeah.
Pushing into those regions would not be pleasant.
Yeah.
The only hope would be like a revolution behind the lines, or
Yeah, I mean, if this ends up being, yeah, I mean, speaking of revolution behind the lines, like if there was a if the metaphor I'm using is like the Falklands, like idea that this is a defeat that could be so humiliating for Putin that it brings down the Kremlin.
well, I mean, the junta wasn't that popular back in the day. They did they engaged in war to try and increase their popularity. This war is supported by easily a supermajority of the Russian people,
You think
who are
so?
not just in easily, not just in favor of the war itself, but of all the atrocities we've seen.
That's depressing
You
because
know,
like what I've been seeing is protests against the way like sort of mothers finding out that their sons have died and letting other mothers know. And like I've heard talk, way out east, like in Siberia, of this being quote unquote Moscow's war. I feel like there's dissent, and I feel like it might be stronger than I think Russian government obviously will admit, and I think that really that we can imagine.
well, but I mean, the reason I say a supermajority is I mean, obviously the families of those who have been killed, and the government has lied about it. Obviously they're not going to be happy, but
And
the
those and
most
those and those
important,
numbers are going to increase.
well, of course, I mean, I would imagine there's not a military family in Russia that hasn't suffered at least one casualty in this special operation. But the reason that I think we can be fairly confident that the war is still widespread support is because of how the soldiers and their families are interacting, on intercepted phone calls, in what they're sending back home from what they've looted. These are people who they think it's very similar to how the Nazis acted in the 40s. They think they're fighting something that is unworthy of protection and has to be exterminated. And the people are wholly behind that.
Right.
And you have people openly attacking, World War II veterans arguing for peace in the streets. I mean, that's, it's not a populace that thinks it's wrong.
Yeah.
Which is
do-
why, of course, there's no measure not harsh enough for this lot.
yeah. You want to move to domestic politics?
Not really. I mean, another thing that you have is both the Europeans, aside from, the Deutschland, have been extremely good when it comes to supplying arms. Whereas it's honestly, it's pretty unimpressive.
Yeah.
Our
Planes. Why
level
are we
of
sending
commitment.
planes?
Well, there's a certain amount of a lot of people still haven't moved on from the that's arm them to fight an insurgency bit.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to realize, they're actually fighting a real war.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, if we're not going to put up like a no-fly zone, give Ukraine the ability to do it themselves.
Well, I mean, the planes are there. I mean, you don't want to send, like, some people were suggesting sending like Romania's broken MiG-21s to help, and that would just be a waste of time.
Yeah.
Honestly, the MiG-25, that plane is way out of date. The MiG-21 predates it by about 20 years. It's even more out of date.
Yeah. By the way, Country Club. Oh, sorry, you don't want to talk about. Oh, actually, this is actually about Europe, so we can talk about it. Country Club Conservative says Macron is going to win by at least 10 points. If he doesn't, I'll change my PFP for a week to the most liked tweet here if it's not anything gross. If Le Pen wins, I'm changing it for a month without restrictions. Contest ends at midnight tomorrow.
I would say about 10 points is probably my guess. Obviously a plus or minus by a few, but she's
Yeah.
not going to get up to the top, but she's going to get very close. Very close.
Aye.
I mean, last time I think it was like 2-1, if not worse for
Yeah.
her. But while there is significant public support for perhaps a more Europhile, hawkish position, it's barely a majority in a lot of places, and in France it probably isn't.
Right. It's funny because
I mean,
you have
we saw it wasn't, given
Yeah.
the fascists and communists easily won a majority.
Yeah,
in the first round.
Le Pen has basically said that she wants to find reproachment with Putin. Meanwhile, you have Macron who refuses to call what's happening a genocide. So, yeah,
Well, I mean, the French have done their best.
you think so?
Obviously, Macron's problem is that, like a lot of sort of centralist neoliberals, they tend to go really extreme to try and like fit in with the popular crowd. That's why, I mean, Macron, I think it was like 2 years ago, was accusing Le Pen of being soft on Islam. That's why they keep going on about all this Russia stuff in sort of very abstract ways, disconnected from what they're actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but better than the alternative.
Yep.
All of the alternatives. I wouldn't have supported him in the first round last time. I would have this time.
Yeah. Macron is easily like the best candidate who's running because in some ways Le Pen, by the way, is not far right. She's far left, like compared to Macron, and like on the issues that matter.
Well, they all are. They all are.
Yeah.
The European far right are communists on everything except social issues.
Right. Yeah. It's. I really do want to talk about some interesting moves that have happened in U.S. politics because there's some really interesting stuff. I know, but you don't want to talk about it, so I guess we'll have to find.
No, I just didn't want to. I just wanted to mention the Europe. Well, another thing that I think we have to be quite impressed by is how committed, especially those in Eastern Europe, have been to dealing with this invasion in terms of sending a significant quantity of arms, in terms of sending money, in terms of expelling Russian spies, in terms of providing intelligence, in terms of providing logistics and transport across the border, in terms of hosting millions of refugees. I mean, hell, Moldova has what, 2 million?
Yeah.
I didn't know there were 2 million people in Moldova.
Yeah, no, I mean, Poland has been taking in the bulk of the refugees, like easily a majority.
But I mean, you have, and I honestly don't know how it works in practice, but I mean, you have like Italian elementary schools welcoming, Ukrainian children. Quite a bit heartening compared to perhaps the last time they had a problem of this type.
Yeah. So you really just want to focus on Europe and not talk about?
No, what do you want to talk about? I just wanted to mention that first.
Okay. Isn't it funny how DJ has endorsed JD? You know what I'm talking about? Ohio?
In Ohio? Yeah, I'm like, oh, that's his first and middle. Yeah, it's funny because it both won't help. Both in Ohio and in Arizona, his people are far too divided, and he also picked the wrong one. I assume you saw what Vance had, he tweeted in the past.
Yeah, no, I mean Vance is like he's shown that he will literally say anything he thinks he needs to say to gain favor with the voters, and I'm wondering, do we really want
Well, they're both terrible.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're really lucky it doesn't matter because otherwise we'd be in a lot of trouble.
Hey,
But I mean, you know who he reminds me of? Joe Welch. Remember him?
Joe Walsh.
Yeah. He was one of the most right-wing candidates back in, maybe a decade ago.
Yeah.
And now he goes on MSNBC regularly. Like,
yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting shift.
Whereas this guy is basically just done the opposite.
I have no idea whether or not Joe Walsh's shift has been sincere or not, but
he's a liar. I mean, he was a terrible person back then, and he's a terrible person now.
Yeah. I'll admit I read his book.
What's his name? Goldberg is the only one whose book I've read that I don't. It's a good book, and he's not entirely terrible.
Who? I'm trying to think of Goldberg. Jonah Goldberg. Oh yeah, he's great. He works for the Dispatch.
Yeah, he's sometimes great. There's a bit of the usual hypocrisy, but he's overall fine.
Right. Yeah, I mean, did you see that pull out of Nevada? That apparently
today's or the one last week?
The one I'm thinking of, the one that basically had like 27 to 47. Like 47.
Well, the one that had our people up.
Yeah. It said 47% want to change the direction Biden's going in.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean the approval rating, he's being held down a lot by the left not liking him, but the top, the figures in the middle, those were the disaster. Their incumbents already down.
Yep.
And that's not a state they can afford to lose.
Mm-hmm. New Hampshire, though, is looking like not really that great for Republicans.
It'll be a fight. I mean, you both have, obviously, we could have had an easy gain and have opted instead for something else.
Yeah, I saw that McConnell's spending on I mean, well, first of all, Republicans don't really have an A-tier candidate running in New Hampshire for the Senate.
Morse is fine.
The House is going to be interesting because the way that Chris Sununu wants to draw the map, we might get a shot at both seats.
Yeah, that'll be one that we end up regretting. But it's like, okay, fine.
I personally think Chris Sununu is doing the GOP a favor by doing that.
But we don't, in a year that we're going to win, we don't need the extra seat. We need the extra seat when we're going to lose.
Right.
You don't draw maps for years you're going to absolutely blow them all out. You draw them for when you're, getting wrecked.
Right.
Swing resistant maps. Or wave resistant maps. That's the point. Like in a couple of states are very good at that. Wisconsin, kind of Florida, of which that you do have to appreciate how the new map in Florida is covered versus the map in, say, Illinois.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, you have in Florida a map that's 100% a gerrymander, but a very clean one is covered as the end of democracy, whereas in Illinois they have an exceptionally ugly map that, who cares?
People pointed out like two separate instances of that map splitting Black communities in two on that map.
But I mean, they're not, the communities cited are not, they're like towns. It's like 200,000 people. There's no point to trying to keep them whole.
Right. But remember when I drew that map of Virginia and you chided me for like splitting up the Asian?
Terrible.
Yeah.
Just terrible. I mean, there are lots of but I mean, the point especially is that, it's the arguments against that map are based on pure top line numbers. They're not in good faith talking about, the actual lines.
What I've noticed about the Florida map, and I commented on this, you might have seen this, is that there is a bipartisan tradition in Florida of screwing over Jacksonville. I don't know I don't know what they got against Jacksonville.
Well, I mean, well, I assume you mean Tallahassee.
Well, I'm thinking, well, Democrats decide they want to, put in Jacksonville all the way in with Tallahassee. Republicans want to put a line right through it.
Well, but I mean, Tallahassee is just it, and plus every rural community within 50 miles of it.
Yeah, so
Whereas
you might have seen,
Jacksonville just gets cut in half.
yeah, no, why can't you just keep Jacksonville whole?
But I mean, Duval is whole, so I mean, I think
Jacksonville
it's mostly or
and
all.
Duval are coterminous, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's an astonishingly effective and clean map. Honestly, I went through and made a couple of minute changes, but overall, in terms of cleanliness, if you took one look at it, you'd be like, "Oh, this is really good."
Yeah, no, I drew a map. My Florida second was basically kept all of like Tallahassee and the surrounding area whole. It was Trump plus 11.
Well, another thing to note is, of course, that
and the Jacksonville seat, Florida's fifth, I had that as Biden plus 8.
well, that's the one that all of those other interesting people had as well, to ensure that it remained a blue seat. But in terms of keeping the city quote unquote whole, there's a large difference in terms of the city north and south of the river. Splitting them in half is not the world's most unreasonable proposal.
Yeah.
The only area that could probably be improved, there's no reason to do what they did with Tampa. It could definitely be drawn a lot better.
Couldn't you draw all red seats in the Bay Area?
That's suicide, but his map includes a large rural area in the blue seat, and there's no reason to do that.
Yeah, that just seems like a waste.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably just done for like county reasons. But
does Hillsborough have any rural areas? I'm sure it does. I guess it's small enough, I think, that it does.
Probably. I mean, another thing people were complaining about is how Palm Beach was drawn, but even drawing pretty badly, you can't make a red seat.
They didn't want to keep Pinellas whole. They didn't want a competitive seat on like the Orlando Seminole area.
No, if that's competitive, we're in a lot of trouble.
The Stephanie Murphy seat.
Well, I mean, it put 2 seats in the Orlando area, and then one that desperately tries to take in as much as it can to avoid something bad. But overall, I mean, it's a very good map. It does the right thing in terms of Miami, especially.
I'm personally of the opinion that a fair map would basically be 15 to 13, but would effectively be 17 to 11.
But I mean, there's no reason to draw a fair map. Ideally, the map should be at least somewhat clean. If it looks like Texas.
I mean, Florida should draw a fair map the same way that New York and Illinois should draw fair maps.
Well, of course, that's exactly the point that everybody should be making. Because of course, their maps are a lot more egregious than almost most of ours, with the exception of like Texas.
Yeah.
That's basically the only really radical one.
Yeah, I think a fair map in Illinois is what 11 to 6 is what would be fair. Or
with a lot of suburban swing in there.
Yeah.
I mean, the only good thing is, of course, over the next after this election, the maps will get better. We'll obviously get a new one in North Carolina.
Oh yeah. I'm loving
in Ohio. I think we've won that war, so we probably won't get a too much better one there.
I mean, how did they thwart that amendment? Like, isn't the amendment supposed to have like cross-party cooperation?
In what, Ohio?
Yeah.
Well, you can just read the dissent for how to beat it.
Yeah, I mean, don't Republicans now have to draw the map again in 2025?
I'm sure we'll be drawing it well, but what will probably happen is once we actually have a majority of our own, the previous ruling will just be posthumously overturned and the original map. Will be
Ohio
the
Republicans
four-year
still
map.
have a majority on the Supreme Court.
O'Connor's not practically not a Republican anymore.
Yeah.
There's no reason to counter as one. But I mean, once that, and I mean, the map that we have now is pretty decent to start with.
Mhm.
Obviously the original map was better, and so returning to that would be nice.
I mean, I would love to see a what is it, a 8 to 4 to 3 map.
Yeah, I think 11 to 2 sounds better.
There's no that's you mean 13 to 2?
Yeah, 13 to 2. Yeah. How many ever there are? That
there's-
sounds a lot better.
There's 15 seats in total.
Yeah.
I mean, why didn't they fully crack Cincinnati?
You can't.
Like
That's an explicit violation of the amendment.
okay.
That's
Then-
why you always see it doing that very weird turn to include some of it
Mhm.
or to include it. You have to keep it whole. The
But-
only reason that our current maps get away with it is just the cities, honestly, in Ohio aren't that large.
Yeah. What I'm wondering is if the U.S. Supreme Court will sort of adopt this idea that all rules binding legislatures on drawing maps are invalid. Legislatures can do whatever they want.
It's the only thing I could potentially see them doing is banning state Supreme Courts from imposing their own maps.
Why? The state Supreme Court is a part of the state structure.
No, but I mean, if you take, say, that the state legislature doctrine, right?
Yeah.
And you say, okay, it's fine to interpret that through the rules of the Constitution. Obviously, legislatures have limits placed on them all the time, so far as what they can pass. But courts don't generally have the power to pass their own laws.
Yeah.
And so having sort of an Ohio rule where they can kill maps, but they can't impose their own. And I think that would be a fair interpretation of that rule and something that wouldn't cause too many problems across the board.
All right. My eyes are
because
sort of.
I mean, you can't.
My eyes are kind of burning right now. Can we take 5?
Of course.
Okay. And we're back. So you were saying something. You're gonna say something about Wisconsin during the break. There was that ruling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we obviously had to eat the governor's congressional map, which honestly wasn't that bad. Oh wait.
Yeah.
My mic being on would help.
Your mic's on. I can hear you.
No, I'm using a completely different microphone than I thought I was. How funny. But obviously his legislative one would have probably put us in the upper 50s in terms of seats.
Yeah.
Whereas this map puts us in the mid to upper 60s.
Which means a supermajority.
So
Yeah, I think the latest projection I saw was obviously we need Dems at 33 for a supermajority because 99 seats, and they're favored in 34. So one of those seats goes our way, we're good.
Yep.
Or just winning the governorship, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how sort of it looks like Democrats are going to be a cakewalk, and now things are starting to go Republicans' way.
Well, that's how midterms work. Actually, the substance of the ruling was even more damaging for Dems, given they quite expertly dismantled the usual argument about gerrymandering in the law, and they also, for all practical purposes, endorsed the idea of the legislature being able to unilaterally pass its own maps
Yeah.
via resolution. So it should be considered a significant victory for us there.
So there's actually been an update out of Arizona. Mark Brnovich has lost the Trump endorsement.
Well, I did see he anti-endorsed him.
Yeah.
That likely won't matter.
Is that he's going to endorse Blake Masters?
Well, the fact that he didn't endorse him means that his people will remain divided, and so Brnovich should still win.
Yeah. I mean, I was hoping that Ducey would run.
He's a bit unpopular. It's a problem.
Really? Oh, I thought, I don't know. I remember he was popular in 2018 from what I remember.
Tragically, it's not 2018 anymore.
Yeah. Um, so I mean, oh, isn't it great that Democrats are going to be stuck with Fetterman in Pennsylvania?
That is funny.
Yeah, no, all indications at first were going to be that that Connor Lamb was going to take the nomination, and because politics are not supposed to make sense, he's gone nowhere.
Well, he'll just be an easier candidate. I mean, he's a terrible person in general.
Fetterman.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
So he'll be much easier to beat than Lamb, who has embarrassed us a number of times. Will be, as long as we get somebody who's not a doctor, we should be fine.
Oh, yeah. Do you think there's a chance that Oz could lose this thing?
Rather easily. I've heard the trends are against him.
Yeah.
And McCormick, who is, obviously a B tier candidate, but we're not going to need a very good candidate to win. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
We just need a not rock bottom trash.
The thing about New Hampshire is that McConnell's like spending on a number of states, and you have like Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania that are all in that category. With New Hampshire's not in that list. Alaska is.
Oh, kicking Murkowski out would be a gain for us in the same way New Hampshire would be.
Yeah, I mean,
she's an unreliable vote in a state that doesn't need another unreliable.
McConnell is coming in to help Murkowski get reelected.
Is he? I thought he was just going to help Kelly. I can't pronounce her last name.
You think McConnell's coming in for Kelly Chewbacca?
Yeah.
I thought McConnell doesn't really endorse against his own members.
Yeah, but she's only barely his own members.
Yeah, so I mean, I could just verify.
I mean, obviously, Alaska's a state that we need to start fighting harder in. We obviously getting a majority in the state house would be nice.
I mean, isn't it sort of like the case that Murkowski sort of represents the median voter in Alaska?
Probably, but that doesn't mean we have to tolerate her.
Oh yeah, that McConnell looks like he's trying to help Murkowski, from what I see.
That'd be a waste of money because I mean she'll probably still win, but there's no reason to try and fight and save her.
Yeah, she doesn't have a Democratic challenger now, so she's just going for she has to win by basically getting that coalition she's gotten before.
Yeah. So that would be an unfortunate waste of money, but spending on the ground anyway is good because obviously Alaska's it's becoming a purple state.
Yeah, I'm wondering what's happening. Like, what's the demographics on the ground that's happening? Is it Alaskan natives or is
no? It's the fact that we've been relying on suburbs there to win.
Oh yeah, we rely on the cities like Anchorage and particularly Fairbanks.
So losing those is starting to become a problem. Like I tried drawing a state house map, and the blue areas are a majority of the state. So
geography is
at least the Biden areas.
Geography screws over Republicans in Alaska the same way that geography screws over Republicans in Nebraska, the same way that geography screws over Republicans in Nevada.
Well, I mean, it's not so I mean, it's sort of the problem Dems have in Wisconsin. It's basically the exact same problem. With the only exception that the rural areas in Alaska can be kind of weird. They're, weird independents and,
Yeah. I mean, Democrats are
all sorts of sort of strange stuff. I mean, the constituencies you can imagine are fairly tiny. But we just need, so winning that back would be nice and kicking the coalition out.
Yeah. I wonder how like Barrow voted. This is the town of Barrow. That's like on the very north of the state.
Probably for an independent.
Yeah. I'm wondering how it went, like Trump versus Biden. If the town is like majority native, it might be Biden.
Probably by a lot.
Yeah.
Then I'll load a
Is it-
map of Alaska, see how long it takes me to find it.
Yeah. Biden won, I believe, Anchorage for, I believe, the first Democrat since 64 to win Anchorage.
Sounds about right.
The borough is coterminous with the city, right?
No clue, I'm looking for it. Well, honestly, can't say I've ever heard of it, so,
Oh, should I let, oh, Anchorage?
no Barrow.
Oh yeah, so but I'm saying no. So Anchorage Borough is what I meant to say is in the case of Anchorage, but yeah, Barrow, Alaska is like a very northern remote town. Like there's actually no roads that go to it.
Technically, there's only roads in Alaska that even go to.
Okay, so let me
Alaska itself.
so let me get you a share.
Oh, it's not called Barrow, that's why I can't.
Oh yeah,
find
change
Okay,
it.
I
Oh
found it.
yeah, it changed its name.
Okay, I can tell you
It-
how it voted. So it's 60% native and it went narrowly for Biden.
Oh, it narrowly for Biden.
Yeah, 6 points.
6 points.
And the
I'm wondering-
constituency net and the precinct net or the town or technically, or actually technically that's the county. So turn the county off. I'll go to. Oh, actually, the city itself is nearly supermajority native, and it only went for Biden by like 30 votes.
30 votes.
Yeah, out of 1,300.
Oh wow, that's close.
So they're weird.
Yeah. I mean, natives tend to like the Native Americans tend to be democratic, except with the exception obviously of the Cherokee in Oklahoma and the Lumbee in North Carolina.
Yeah, I mean they're very swingy because I mean a lot of it is just they don't vote unless it's technically the white people there that are actually swinging.
Yeah, well, why
Um,
is I mean, what I'm wondering is like that congressional district in like that's like Devin Nunes' seat. That's like it's like Republican, but it's like 44% Hispanic. What I'm wondering is that because Hispanics there are conservative, or is it because they're Hispanics that are not voting?
They're not citizens.
Oh,
It's the same thing in Texas.
they're not citizens.
Yeah, they're mostly either not here legally or or just normal non-citizen immigrants.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that was the case. Like, is that also the same thing like in the Texas Panhandle where you have like the the 13th district, like that's like 80-20 for Trump, but like
Yeah.
is like a third Hispanic?
Well, you see this, yeah, I mean, you see the same thing in Phoenix where you'll see an area that has 15,000 people, 90% of whom are Hispanic, and then you've got like 1,000 voters, if that.
Oh wow.
They're very useful in many cases, areas like that.
Isn't that like
Um,
immigrant gerrymandering?
Well, it's what you're looking for. It's basically the same logic as prison gerrymandering, where you're looking for places with people but not voters.
Yeah, I mean,
Because then you
prison
get the population for free without having to deal with voters.
yeah, that's just sus.
It is very sus, and it's one of the reasons you do have to be careful mixing Hispanic and white areas together.
I wonder if
Because the Hispanic areas are gonna way undervote
yeah, what I'm
compared to
wondering
the white areas.
is if they can draw districts like that are like almost entirely Hispanic that have like no voters.
Probably, I mean, you've seen, or especially in like 2014. I know Vallejo's seat probably had like 40,000 voters.
Valadeo, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I can look up his first, really low number of.
Yeah, I mean, you have similar disparities like in the UK. I've noticed that like the south of England tends like to have the highest turnout. Then it tends to be lower, like up in the north. Then and also in Scotland. Then it tends to get really low when you get to nationalist areas of Northern Ireland.
It's partly a matter of turnout. It's also partly a matter of, that's just where the growth is. They haven't done, boundary, adjustments in like a decade.
Oh well, they haven't. Wow, why?
Well, because, labor benefits from that disparity.
In Northern Ireland, where labor doesn't even run.
No, but everywhere else.
Yeah.
Northern Ireland has a set number of seats that doesn't move for population. That's why.
Why are they allowed to do that?
Because they needed unionist votes back in the day,
Yeah, I mean, like
and that was their price.
if everyone joined the U.S. Constitution, like those districts would be like redrawn to heck.
I mean, there's something to be said for like geographically restricted constituencies.
Yeah, it's like in Ontario. Do you know that there's actually a 300% population disparity between some of the ridings in Ontario? You have like these ridings far up north that have like 30,000 people, and then you have some in Toronto that have like 120,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to, like, I know the UK has like 5 of them for like the islands.
Yeah,
You don't want to go too far with that, but at the same time, there is something to be said for not, rigidly saying every district has to have the exact same number of people.
so why doesn't the U.S. decide to do that? Why doesn't the court get on that idea?
Well, because otherwise then you just get, the old state senate model
Right.
where, you deliberately use that to give, an extreme number of seats to rural areas.
Yeah, it's kind of like what the
Um,
because they to this day happens in states that have state supreme courts by district.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in large part, they're usually equal. The problem with Illinois is the map hadn't been redrawn since the 1960s.
Yeah,
But otherwise it was equal at the time. Well, per the rules back then. But nowadays, even districted Supreme Courts, the boundaries should be roughly equal.
yeah,
They're probably allowed to float a little bit more heavily just because they're so big.
yeah.
Um,
And also
and
they
so you
can't
get-
split counties.
Yeah, so if you can't split counties, then you're gonna see some gaps. But even then, I mean, you can see like what we did for the Texas State House, where you can still do good things even with county split rules.
Yeah,
Um,
and you actually have states that historically that have like drawn counties purely for political reasons. Like Georgia is an example of this, where they drew so many counties because you gave the people geographic areas more power if there were more counties.
which of course doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
and
I'd
and
much prefer, if we could trade the number of counties between California and Georgia, I'd love it.
yeah, and it's also true with states to some extent because like you had people like talk about like the admission of like people talk about admitting Washington D.C. as like an overtly political act, and it's true, but is it any more political than like splitting Maine off of Massachusetts just to have another free state, or admitting the Dakota Territory as 2 states?
Well, I mean, in the first case, that was simply a matter of you can't have 2 disconnected states. That and everybody hated Massachusetts. Whereas the Dakotas, I mean, it's both not the 1880s anymore. And also what that was done for was to decrease the power of the South.
Right.
So I mean, if people want to oppose that kind of thing, then they're free to try. But as for the boundaries themselves, not really. The number of states admitted, sure, but the actual boundaries never really showed that effect.
Yeah. I wonder what would happen if you were to redraw the United States to just draw a bunch of squares everywhere.
Well, I mean, if you were going to redraw the states, I mean, you'd cut California in half. You'd probably
Cut
cut
Texas.
Washington. You'd probably make a giant state out of the eastern Pacific Northwest. You'd
Out of
combine the
Idaho,
Dakotas.
Oregon, and Washington, like that sort of geographic area.
Yeah, I
Like-
mean, you'd probably like make that area 3 states instead of 2.
Yeah.
You combine the Dakotas.
I mean,
That's
what
probably
I
about
would
it.
do is I take the eastern like 2/3 of Oregon, like Oregon, like and Washington up until the Cascades, and then join that onto Idaho, and then
Yeah, I mean, you'd
and then split
probably
southern
want-
Idaho, and I'd put that with Utah.
And then you'd probably want to do something to New York to split it off, the upstate from the city.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean,
but as long as we can prevent Puerto Rico from becoming a state, I think it's all good.
yeah. I've noticed that you've heard of the city of like Brampton, Ontario, that's in just outside of Toronto.
No.
It is kind of the equivalent of like Dutchess County or Poughkeepsie. It's sort of this Democratic trending area that has Republicans dominant on the local level. Like,
Well, I mean, don't most Ontario cities have more conservative local governments?
yeah, Brampton has a progressive conservative mayor.
No, but I mean, across the board, I mean, even
Yeah, I
Toronto
mean,
itself has a
yeah,
conservative
yeah,
mayor.
John Tory, yeah, yeah. So I mean, I like that. It kind of gives me like vibes of like parts of Fairfield County, Connecticut, or Dutchess
Well,
County.
but I mean, you see that's not uncommon in officially nonpartisan races to where the local affiliations, the local winners will be the opposite of the national ones. I mean, look at Calgary, it has a left-wing mayor.
Calgary.
Yeah, I think.
That's a relatively conservative city.
Yeah, I'm reasonably sure.
Edmonton, just so you know, is the leftist city.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure Calgary itself had or elected the.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's looking like the NDP is going to
the-
come back to power in Calgary. Not in Calgary, in Alberta.
Well, like, I mean, the next election is still in a year, so
Yeah.
there's time for hopefully a new leader to get a grip.
There's time for Lula da Silva to somehow blow this race against Bolsonaro.
Honestly, I couldn't care less who wins. They're both so terrible that
Okay. GOT Gondek. Who is this guy?
that's really sexist that you assumed it was a guy.
Oh, it's a woman. She was born in London, in the UK. Doesn't say what her party necessarily is.
But I can tell you, given the second place candidate was a member of the
Oh,
UCP, I
Sean
can kinda
Chu.
guess what her
Sean
affiliation was.
Chu. I remember Sean Chu. He was a guy who was running for the city council in Calgary and was embroiled in a huge scandal.
Sounds about right.
Oh yeah, he was accused of sexually assaulting of a 16-year-old girl while a police officer. That's what happened.
Sounds about right. But otherwise, I'm pretty sure she was even though technically she had a lot of contributions from developers, so perhaps not that left.
Urban Development Institute.
That's always usually a good sign for most people.
Yeah. It is.
If developers like you, generally I like you.
Yeah. Do you think that yeah, I'm just jumping around. Do you think the British are going to be able to successfully make inroads with Indian Brits?
Oh God, no. They've totally they've eliminated any special privileges that they had before.
Oh yeah.
You know, the seats in parliament, all that other stuff.
Oh, they had privileged seats in parliament?
Yeah.
Have they redrawn the map yet?
They'll never redraw the map. It's illegal.
Oh, they can't the map has to stay like the same.
Well, it's not, the map doesn't really matter because there's so many seats, but it's the distribution of seats per region
Oh,
it hasn't been changed since the 1970s and is illegal to change.
so
It was
parliament
supposed
can't.
It was supposed to encourage regions to enforce the, birth control measures.
Right. So
Um,
you don't think that the Conservatives are going to give the UK parliamentary map the Fidesz treatment?
Oh no, I was talking about India. In the
Oh,
UK,
India. Oh no.
no, in UK they have new boundaries planned.
Oh, we were talking. You've been talking about India this entire time.
That's what you said.
I'm talking about UK making the Conservatives making inroads with Indian Brits.
Oh, I thought you meant Brits in India.
Oh, are
I
there
was talking
Brits in
about.
India?
Yes.
Um,
In the UK, I doubt it. Not with the current PM.
yeah.
I
I mean,
but
like,
as for the map, it will improve. I believe they've already. I think the boundary commissions. I believe they're waiting or
the
they
Conservatives are not going to
finished,
draw it. They're not going to gerrymander a map themselves.
that's just that they don't. That's not how they do it in the UK. They have boundary reviews. Oh yeah, they're doing public consultations now.
Yeah,
so.
most countries seem to have working independent redistricting commissions.
Oh, yeah, so the next reviews began. Oh, they're scheduled for 2023, so,
Okay.
um,
I know that
so
Eric
hopefully they'll be
Cunningham.
done by the next
I know
election.
Eric Cunningham is not a fan of the UK's process.
It's. It's not, it's not good or bad. I mean, it's, with so many seats, there is no gerrymandering, right? I mean, it's not possible without a different mechanism.
You have to cut the number of seats in half.
Well, you have to, I mean, if you really felt like it, you could do the old, you could do basically what the existing map is, except in the opposite direction, you know. Give the cities, you know, a huge or a smaller number of seats than rural areas. If you really felt like it. But overall, I mean, it's just eliminating the pro-labor bias from the current maps.
I mean, like that labor bias is sort of going away on its own because of the North basically just that red wall just thinning out.
I mean, not real. I mean, they still, I do believe, overperform. I mean, even in looking at the last
Like, I mean,
election,
yeah, I mean, wouldn't we expect like Ed Miliband to be unseated in the next election?
should have been unseated. But I mean, even if you say look at um the proposed boundaries, if you put in the exact same results as last time, conservatives still gain a bunch more. I mean, we'll just do it right now just for the memes. Yeah, I mean, they gain, there's another 20 seat swing. No, there's not, because
Kind of reminds me of this constituency in Manitoba. There's in the parliamentary map of Manitoba, one of the parliamentary districts takes up the entire two northern thirds of the entire province. It's I think majority of plurality Indigenous Canadian. You actually have candidates who run for the NDP. The NDP is strong in this area, but you actually have had candidates in the past who from this particular riding who support gun rights, for example. While also one of them previous incumbents was actually against same-sex marriage.
sounds about
Yeah.
right.
So
The funniest one to me is lately is Prince Edward Island.
they have two more. They have 4 seats, which is 2 more than they should have.
No, but just in the fact that we went from a place in which it was shocking that the progressive conservatives were able to win to where now it looks like they'll win every single seat.
Oh, they'll win every single seat in well, because like in 2015, the Liberals won every single seat in all of the.
Well, I mean, on a provincial level.
Yeah. Oh, well, on the they could win the entire like every seat in the legislature. Like no other party could win.
I mean, unironic, because I mean, in the last election, it was about over a third for the progressive conservatives, and then under a third for the Greens and the Liberals each. Now it's 2/3 for the progressive conservatives and about 15%.
Yeah. I mean,
Greens and Liberals each.
the progressive conservatives are basically just like ascending everywhere. Like,
Well, even in, I don't know how Doug Ford is still alive, honestly. That is
because
shocking.
the opposition is just unheard of. Yeah. I mean, no one
Well, I
knows.
mean, we all know they're trash, but the fact that they're continuing to maintain their good enough to win poll lead
Yeah.
is
The
still
thing
quite
about the
good.
conservatives is that they have to win an outright majority, or else they're not going to win the next government. If they win the largest number of seats but not a majority, the opposition parties will just form a government themselves.
No,
Like
I mean, usually anyway.
yeah, the Liberals and the NDP will just combine. Like if the Conservatives like fall short of a majority.
Yeah.
But
But obviously there's no PR because Trudeau, stabbed his own people in the back. So
yeah. Before we like end this off, there's been some action in Israel, or rather some unrest.
it's just the same boring. One side starts a riot, the other side puts it down. Then the radical down.
But have they?
It's the
Yeah.
usual boring pattern. No point to even paying
Yeah.
attention.
But has Naftali Bennett lost his majority? Has he managed to put that back together?
No, but he doesn't need a majority. He has a budget, so he's safe for 2 years.
Oh wow. Well, they're not going to have a vote of no confidence.
It would fail 60-60.
Oh, you need an outright majority to.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same in the House of Commons.
Well, I mean, like, is it possible to have like any? Oh yeah, because possible to have an even number of seats because like you consider there's like 4 constitutional officers and then the 7 members of Sinn Féin, so it actually reduces it to an odd number of seats, 639.
Yeah. Well, but you'll remember, I mean, the vote of confidence in 1979 passed by a single vote,
Yeah, in the
whereas it
UK,
could have tied and would have went down.
yeah, it's kind of funny how in the UK the speaker is like a constitutional office that doesn't vote, and unlike in the US where they're the leader of the largest party, in Canada the speaker also doesn't vote except to break ties.
Well, that's how they are in the UK.
Oh, that's how they are in the UK too.
Yeah, they vote in favor of continuing things and against actually passing things.
Oh wow.
It's well, you'll remember on one of the indicative motions tied and Burko had to vote
Oh
no.
yeah, I miss Burko. Oh,
He's such an asshole. He
Oh,
totally
da.
deserves what he got. What a
I-
terrible person.
I miss that voice. That oh da.
I mean, nobody respected him by the end, and everybody is
Yeah.
fine with the current guy.
No one runs against the speaker in his riding, so his constituency doesn't really get
Well, nobody
represented.
mainstream anyway.
Well, so his constituency doesn't really get represented.
Well, it's represented by the speaker. If he has comments about something, generally it happens.
Yeah, but if he doesn't vote, then he can't advocate for the interests of his riding, can he?
You always want to keep the speaker happy. Let's just say that.
Okay.
If you really want an interesting election, you should look at Slovenia's upcoming one. What a
Oh,
shit show.
Oh, Slovenia has an upcoming election. Isn't that going to be rigged?
What a shit show. This is going to be so terrible. I mean, you're literally going to have at least 2/3 of the votes not count. What's the threshold? 4%?
Wow.
These are the parties. 18%, 3%, 7%, 3%, 5%, 5%, 1%, 1%.
Yeah.
2%,
Basically,
2%,
what happens in
1%,
Israel, if they don't make the threshold, their votes quote unquote get redistributed among the other parties, which is a fancy way of saying they don't count.
They have agreements though, to make sure, but the problem is just the number. I think in I'm trying to remember if it was in the Czech Republic where an enormous number of votes didn't count.
Well, is that how the
Um,
opposition came to power?
Well, I mean, they came to power because they won first place, but at least by votes. But was it? No, it wasn't. Which election was it? I remember everybody was
2021?
complaining about it.
I remember.
I mean,
I
there's
think.
a high proportion.
Yeah. What was that?
There's a pretty high proportion of votes that didn't count. The threshold looks to be 5%. But a majority definitely counted. I mean, you have mid 50s, 70, 80. Yeah. So vast majority counted there. I'm trying, was it Slovakia? I'm trying to remember what state it was.
Slovakia had a pretty base election result recently.
Well, it did, but I think if I remember correctly, it was definitely one of those states that just had an enormously low.
Hungary in the
What a
referenda.
what a shit show. No, it wasn't Slovenia.
It wasn't Hungary, and it wasn't Hungary specifically in those ballot measures.
Oh, maybe it was actually, maybe it was Slovenia. They do have a lot of votes that didn't count. They had, so it gets up to 40, 50, 60, 65.
Cameron, speaking
70.
of
So,
shit
yeah, they had
show,
about a little.
Hungary. I was saying, speaking of shit show, Hungary.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
Just
so
the usual at this point. What an absolute disaster.
yeah. So Slovenia.
I'd kick him out of the EU for that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, aren't they moving now to like basically make him the backwater of the E EU?
I would. I'd kick him out now. I'd tell the people don't deserve it.
Yeah. And apparently he doesn't have the protection from Poland now.
Yeah. So as soon as the Article 7 vote comes up, they'll lose it.
If
Because
it
his
comes,
friends, he had friends in the Czech Republic, they've been kicked out, and the Poles are would probably rather invade Hungary than support them now.
yeah. What I remember reading about the Czech Republic is apparently that there was a bill coming up that would have supported legalizing same-sex marriage that didn't come to a vote before the election, before the other party came to power. What do you think? Where do you think that things stand on that right now?
With a right-wing government, probably not very favorably.
Oh, right. I mean, because
I'm sure the pirates are in favor of it, but I doubt it would pass.
right. So that I guess that was a less based outcome of that election, even though it's a great that the current government is now in power.
I mean, it's not one of my particularly favorite issues, so
Yeah. I think it's just inevitable at this point.
unless you're in the Eastern Europe.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, within the EU, things are changing. Like even Italy, I could see it happening eventually. Greece, I could see it happening eventually.
Well, I mean, the
Ukraine,
problem for, I
maybe
mean,
not Ukraine.
Italy, although Ukraine should be mentioned in the context of the EU, it'll probably be a member by the end of the year.
Yeah,
I saw they submitted their 500-page, application.
yeah. But you were saying about Italy.
Well, I mean, Italy's gonna have, I mean, it's just what flavor of the right do you want? That's who's gonna win.
Yeah, I mean, but the right is not necessarily like hardline social conservative, is it?
Currently the brothers of Italy definitely are.
Right. I mean, but what about Czech Republic? Like,
I mean, they're not that hardcore, but the problem is they don't have a left.
the Czech Republic doesn't have a left.
Yeah, they have the right, the pirates, who I guess are the left. Then they have the far right, and then the even far right.
Who was governing the Czech Republic prior to this past election?
The centralists, but actually far right.
Oh wow.
Anno,
Yeah.
terrible people. They should have kicked the president out already. I don't know why he's still around.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, just speaking about Hungary, did you know that guess who in the United States has been a big supporter of Hungary's system and what Fidesz is doing and thinks it should be a model for what's happening in the US, what should happen in the US?
Certain television host.
I'm also thinking Team DeSantis. If you follow Christina Pushaw
Oh
on
yeah.
Twitter.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Fortunately, the other person she's with isn't as insane, but you do generally want to stay away from anything not healthcare related from her.
Yeah.
It's a bit frightening. It's the LOL libertarians,
Yeah. It's like
The only good thing is, I mean, what we're seeing today is from at least a lot of politicians, a significant reduction in support for, people who, the George Galloways of the world.
right. But we're
Um,
seeing, I think, like some of the right embracing like the Viktor Orbans and like, well, I think that comparisons like of the GOP to Putin is obviously insane. I think that you could make a credible case that what's happening to certain parts of the GOP is like what's happening to Fidesz or the BJP.
Well, I mean, all the situations are different, but I mean, even in terms of whether or not, we support Putin or whatever, if they want that, then why did Bush and her other friends vote against an oil embargo?
Oh yeah, because it's the horseshoe theory.
Yeah, total embarrassment from the far. I mean, you have the usual suspects all over ranting about NATO and all that. It was quite good. There was an infamous podcaster who was in Ukraine spouting a bunch of pro-Russian nonsense.
What's the name of that guy on Twitter who's like, oh, no one's asked if Americans want to get involved in Ukraine. They're just going to send arms, not asking.
Michael Tracy, what an idiot! What a total fool. I mean, but I mean, obviously the behavior of the Russian army is beyond abhorrent. Literally Nazi stuff.
Yeah.
But it does perhaps provide a degree of clarity.
Yeah,
you're either for Russia or you're against it.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to let you know, as a Jew, like I'm very familiar with the idea of the horseshoe like concept, and like you go hard enough right, you go pretty far left.
Well, I mean, you have say, I saw two different Ukrainian figures, one of which they obviously arrested that one guy, and they should just shoot him. Putin's best friend, who will almost certainly be shot for high treason eventually. And he's a more right-wing member opposing Ukraine. And then you have the leader of the Socialist Party of Ukraine who says that Putin should use nukes. And he needs to be arrested and shot for treason. Sadly, he fled to Spain, I think.
Yeah. Spain
He
has
needs
a
to be brought
left-wing
back.
government, right?
It does, but one that's fully supportive. It is quite funny to see communists support um, this bunch, given despite the fact that the Russians run around with the Soviet flag all over the place. They're not communists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my worry about Spain is like eventually a government including Vox in it.
I mean, they're not. They are obviously on the far right. They're not the world's most unreasonable bunch. You can certainly be worse. And they haven't acted too irresponsibly in the regions where they're in support.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I mean, they're
have
no,
this
but
vague.
in my mind, they're no different than relying on, yes, we can.
Who remind me who Yes We Can is?
Poke. That's English for the Poconos or whatever.
Oh.
The far left.
Oh goodness. Oh, so
Yeah,
like
that's what the term actually means.
yeah, I remember apparently at the start of the war, like apparently everyone in the Stop War Coalition in British Labour, everyone except for Corbyn himself basically disavowed that letter.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, absolute scumbag. Even by left wing, even by the standards of the left wing of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, this is somebody, he's never hid who he was, going on RT all the time, appearing with enormous numbers of Iranian and Russians, going on press TV. I mean, this is all, openly disqualifying stuff.
Oh goodness. I was trying to do a search for, I have this vague memory of this politician in Poland from PIS, who, this is before they got to power. She basically did this political ad that was entirely just her doing a striptease. And
I'd vote for her.
Yeah, I try to find it on YouTube, and you come across results like, holy cow, how is this allowed on YouTube?
I'd vote for her.
Yeah, I just wish I could find the exact video I'm talking about and not anything else. Because no, I can't find it. I can't find it, but I have this vague memory of it.
What a shame. Would have been quite nice. But I mean, that's all fine. I mean, we've seen a lot of cringy, millennials running for office.
Right. I mean, like, I always wonder, like, if it's like the case, like, because in some places, like the far right sort of has a base of support among like young people, like young guys. So I'm wondering if that had something to do with it.
France, for example.
Yeah. Like I'm wondering if the Rallye National basically got like a hotter woman as their nominee, that they'd be running away with this election.
Easily could be. Although I'm sure there's plenty of people who want to take orders from their mother.
Yeah. Anyway.
Of course, we can't. Of course, we can't forget the very good victory in South Korea of the right.
Oh yeah.
Candidate.
You want to talk about that?
He actually underperformed. Ironically, he should have won by a lot more.
Yeah.
But he did win. So
yeah. My father
it's all good.
Yeah, my father had this idea that the war like would basically be devastating. It would basically give a bump to the anti-Putin candidates, and if anything, the people getting the bump are the pro-Putin candidates.
Well, I think what you're going to see is the center dying, sort of the usual suspects who don't, basically the German government, who don't really know what they want to do. They like peace, but aren't willing to actually do anything to get there. And so that lot is going to die in favor of, obviously, the far right and the radicals are going to get more popular just because of economic downturn and the usual isolationist nonsense. But
Yeah,
also, I mean, the more hawkish elements of every government are going to grow stronger.
Germany, in my opinion, Germany had the best possible outcome last year, where you had Armin Laschet not in the government and you had the FDP in the government.
I mean, the best possible outcome would have been an FDP Green government.
Without labor.
Purely between them.
Oh, so without the SDP.
Yeah. The SDP is a bunch of useless fools.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't.
As Schultz is now showing.
Was there ever like any possibility of like Baerbock basically be able to lead a party with just the FDP?
No, but you said the best possible outcome, or you said the best outcome.
Yeah.
I mean, ironically, the new leader of the union is actually pretty good. So I mean,
Uh,
if the
uh, uh,
Greens want to switch
oh,
sides, then
they've replaced Laschet.
oh, yeah, after that loss, they better have.
Although it was he almost won. That's the thing.
Didn't he lose by a lot?
But apparently, at least the exit poll I saw was like that. SDP was up, basically up 1 point over CDU.
I mean, yeah, but it shouldn't have even been close. That's kind of the problem. The union should have led by a lot, is my point.
Yeah, but they
They
nominated.
for their whole history, they usually lead by a lot and can still lose because of
Yeah.
the power of the Greens.
But the fact that they came in second.
Yeah, obviously a disaster. The only good thing from that election is that the far right and far left got just butchered.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, they combined for like what? Not even 15% of the vote. You
Well, I
usually
mean, I
get.
can see here the left, they fell below the threshold.
Yeah. Yeah. Der Linke and AF didn't get in, right?
No, they got in, but just with both down.
What about the AFD?
Down.
Yeah, yeah, no, they were down from the previous election, which is funny because just a few years ago they were thought to be on the ascent.
Well, I mean, a few years ago they were on the ascent.
Yeah, but now
So I mean, you have,
yeah, they're now.
obviously as circumstances change. I mean, Le Pen was rated to be down and out about a month ago.
Yep.
And Melchett, I mean, he actually overperformed.
Oh yeah,
The world is quite
Mélenchon.
lucky. Well, the world is quite lucky that he wasn't the second candidate, or the second place.
Oh, he could have beaten Macron.
Probably. Because I mean,
Damn.
they have the same economic policies as Le Pen, so
Yeah.
whereas the right would not support Macron as much as the left is against Le Pen.
Yeah. I mean, I hope Macron pulls this out.
Oh, he should. I mean, the polls are swinging back in the right direction. I suspect all the massacres are probably helping, given Le Pen's unrepentant support for Russia.
And recent scandals she's just gotten in.
I mean, ironically, embezzling EU money, I would consider that a plus.
Okay. Well, why don't we end it off there?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny actually, because I mean, a lot of people, the EU has been a useless institution for years, whereas
They're a great trading bloc.
they're trying to get a grip.
They're great for trading.
Well, just
Like-
across the board. I mean,
I
they've been,
so one of the reasons I was Remain is because it was a neoliberal's nightmare. You had free trade, and states could not support their own industries. It was like a neoliberal's night.
yeah, but I
dream.
mean, at the same time, they're very supportive of regulations and very much against us
Yeah.
in every way possible. So my policy has usually been support Europhiles outside the EU and support Eurosceptics inside the EU.
Yeah.
But nowadays they have a ton of money and they see a state explicitly attacking them.
Yeah.
So
although in some ways, UK being outside the EU has actually meant that they can put a more muscular sanctions than the EU is.
barely. The fundamental problem, I mean, the UK, they've done a lot of good stuff, but their military is actually very weak. It's kind of sad.
Yeah.
A lot of the UK, it's not good. That's been their deficit reduction strategy. The
Thank
only
you,
good thing is
Thatcher.
our military budget is getting a little bigger. So
Yeah.
I've heard it's probably going to be 850 this year. I mean, that's
yeah,
we
apparently
need it in more.
at the beginning of Thatcher's first term, UK military spending was down, and they were not really paying much attention to their crown colonies.
Well, even they, and they go over this in the movie, even they cut the garrison there for spending reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you don't always get away with austerity when it comes to the military. Whereas, I mean, a lot of places, I totally buy that the Germans simply can't send any more to Ukraine. The Ukrainians are going through an enormous amount of equipment.
They don't know how to preserve it.
No, they're using it.
Oh, they're using it, but okay. I thought it was not. It's not. So, but I hope they're using it efficiently.
Well, yeah, but I mean, war. I mean, we for the past since this is a war that is basically like World War II
Yeah.
in terms of its scale. I mean, it's enormously equipment intensive to, have artillery duels or to fight in cities.
Yeah. And let's end off with the fact that we're like 8 weeks in. What is it now? Almost 8 weeks. And Russia has already lost
Yeah.
a third, more than a third of what the US lost in Vietnam.
Well, I mean, they've lost almost a third. They've probably, in terms of casualties, lost a fourth to a third of their entire force.
Wow. I mean,
I mean,
how do they recover from that?
they won't. I mean,
Like-
it's fundamental. A lot of places are saying, if we give the weapons to the Ukrainians, how will we defend ourselves?
Yeah.
And the answer is, you won't need to. The Russians are not going to be a threat
Yeah.
to anybody.
And if the Russians didn't have nukes, NATO would have by this point overrun Russia.
Oh yeah. I mean, the Finns could probably take St. Petersburg right now. I mean, it's not even funny how weak the Russians are militarily. I mean,
Yeah.
the losses are so heavy. It's not even fair to judge them. I mean, in terms of aircraft, for God's sakes. Apparently the usual suspects say we'll be banning anti-satellite missiles. That's nice.
Yeah, that's Harris.
Jesus.
Oh, you just saw that now?
I did.
Yeah. The ostensibly to prevent space debris.
It's no, I mean, you still want them. What is this about Malcolm Nance joining the Ukrainian International Brigades?
Okay, well, why don't we end things off there? Where can people follow you?
Well, I mean, you said CA conservative.
Or isn't it at CA Cameron GOP? Is that your handle?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't
Well,
even know what your handle is.
it's now Red Hill John.
Oh,
Yeah. I don't know. Overlord Johnny just sounded a little bit childish.
yeah. I mean, really, the funny thing is, despite all of the pain and suffering and murder, the comedy is still shining through in terms of, what's the record for how far a turret of a T-72 is flying away from a tank after it's been hit?
Yeah, or the first time in over 100 years that a Russian ship has been promoted to a submarine.
Oh, no, I like the meme where they photoshopped in the battleship.
Oh no,
Pins?
and the tractor pulling it away.
Oh yeah. I mean, they're the best shit posters on the planets, the Ukrainians. They don't care.
No, someone described Ukraine.
They're absolutely ruthless and they do not care.
Basically, someone described it as Russia basically said, we're going to invade. And Ukraine is like, fuck around and find out.
Yeah. They're not, they don't care and they're not afraid. Beating an enemy like that is incredibly difficult.
Mhm.
All that
Yeah,
shock
or-
and awe stuff, it doesn't really work when
FAFO, right? Is that the term FAFO?
probably. I mean, the funny thing is that even now, the Russian army is not designed for what they're using it for.
Yeah.
This whole, we'll send all the mechanized into the cities to take them. Really?
Mm-hmm.
You'll send in 50-year-old vehicles into an urban environment when the enemy has more anti-tank weapons than they have people.
And it's like, we'll just
Good
keep
luck.
trying. We got beat. Let's try it again.
Well, no, it's literally the Hearts of Iron meme. We'll just click the force attack button and it'll be okay.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there's like a Gru's plan meme that we can talk about Putin. It's like step 1, deploy troops into Ukraine single file. Step 2, march on Kyiv. Step 3, get our butts kicked. Step 4, get our butts kicked.
Oh yeah, I mean, the only thing that the Russian military is good at is murdering civilians.
Yeah.
They're absolutely, I mean, it's a third world country with a fourth-rate military at this point.
All right. Well, we should have ended this call a while ago. So, but thank you so much for
No,
joining
I'll let
me.
you go rest your eyes.
Yeah, for sure.